Hi, good afternoon. This is Abra from CLPHA. We are just waiting for a few more people to join, but as you get started, please just hold tight. And if you have any questions about your audio or other connections, please go ahead and type it in the public chat box, which you can find in the bottom right hand of the screen. Thanks for your patience. Hi, this is Abra from CLPHA. If you're just now joining us, we are just waiting for a couple more folks to get joined to see a couple people still signing in. So we appreciate your patience, and we will get started shortly. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on which coast you're on. This is Abra from CLPHA. I see that there's still just a couple folks planning to join, so we are going to give it just one more minute here. Want to be respectful of all of your time as well before we go ahead and get started. If you are having any trouble with your audio, I've put the phone number and participant PIN ID into the chat box, which you can see in the bottom sort of right hand of your screen. You can also email me at abra@clpha.org. Get started just in a minute here. Thank you. Okay, thanks so much for everyone's patience. This is Abra from CLPHA. So glad that we have all of you joining us. I know folks are starting to leave for the holidays. Very excited about today's presentation, which I'll be introducing our speaker in just a moment here. Housekeeping reminders. We have everybody automatically unmute just to help minimize background noise. So if you do have any questions, either of a technical nature or for our presenter today, please go ahead and type them in the public chat box or via private chat. You can find that in the bottom right hand of the screen. You can type those questions You don't need to wait until the end of the presentation, so don't have to worry about forgetting your question. We are recording today's webinar, so if you want to revisit it after the fact or share with a colleague, then you would be able to do that. We'll be posting the recording on our housingisd.org website, which I believe most of you are familiar with. If you're not, check it out. Lots of great resources and communities on there to help you with your work on housing and education. One final thing that I'll just say before I introduce our speaker is, in case you haven't seen, we do have our upcoming Housing Is Summit, which is our annual cross-sector event. We have it every year. This will be our 6th year, and it's a really, really great event to bring together folks from the housing world, PHA executive directors, program staff. Many of you have been there in the past. Education folks from school districts, from nonprofits, from community-based organizations, from research institutions, from federal agencies, from foundations. So really, really a rich collection of people who are all focused on doing cross-sector work in order to help low-income residents. So this year, it's happening on April 30th and May 1st. That's a Thursday and Friday in Washington, D.C. There's information on our website, both housingisd.org as well as CLPHA.org, on how to get registered for that. But if you have any questions, you can always send me an email. I will go ahead and put my contact information in the public chat box for those of you who. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce our speaker today. Those of you who were at our summit last year might remember on our Childhood Poverty panel, we had a representative from the Child Welfare League of America presenting on some of their work. And so as a follow-up with our partnership with them, we're doing today's webinar to learn a little bit more about the child welfare field and how that fits in with housing. So I'm at this point going to turn it over to Julie Collins and let her introduce herself further. Julie?
Thanks, Abra. Welcome, everybody. It's my honor to be with you today and to share a little bit more about CWLA and some of those potential connectors in the work that could be going on with you all, as we all try to do what we can to support children and families so that children can remain safe and can actually flourish. So I am the Vice President of Practice Excellence at CWLA and kind of oversee a wide portfolio that runs from prevention of child abuse and neglect through to the more intensive mental health, behavioral health related kinds of issues. We'll be talking more about some of the different projects and things that we do at CWLA. So let me start with just talking a little bit about, I think that you probably heard some of this information perhaps from Chris when she was speaking on the panel, but by way of sharing a little bit about us, we're really the oldest national organization that really represents both the public child welfare related kinds of services, as well as we call them private members. The others, language that might be more familiar to you would be not-for-profit agencies in the communities, but all of them are working with children and families who are potentially vulnerable. And really, CWLA emerged out of the first White House conference that took place in the 1920s. We're going to be celebrating our 100th anniversary, as you see by the logo there on the left-hand side. And it really was a group of both those public and private agencies that really decided they needed an entity that was independent, that would set the best practices. So they didn't want something that was licensing, and they didn't want a body that would be like an accrediting body, because they didn't want to have that nature of relationship. They really wanted somebody that set the bar really high for them, that was created those best practices that were really aspirational of what everybody should be reaching for in order to do right by children and families. So We have been doing that for, almost 100 years, as we talked about. And as you can imagine, over that 100 years, the focus has ranged depending on kind of what's happening in society at that point in time. We started out doing an immense amount of work related to childcare, by way of example. So the so you have a little bit of a picture of kind of where we are. We really are basically almost in every state, and some of them have a lot more members, but we have a wide variety of members. And not just what you might think of in terms of the public child welfare agency, but it might be related to behavioral health. We have some of the folks that do the juvenile justice work. We have a lot of early care providers, those that are doing prevention. We have a group of family-run organizations. We have a number of different, public health-related folks that are part of all of this. So, and more as we go forward. I know Chris probably talked to you about the National Blueprint for Excellence in Child Welfare. It really has created that opportunity for an opening of way more entities to come to the table with us. The other thing that I wanted to point out is we do actually have corporations that are part of us. We've had a number of the managed care entities that are managing kind of the behavioral health related services, in particular the Medicaid ones for the child welfare related population, and therefore they really see a good connection and want to be part of the work that we're doing. We also have some of the IT folks that are creating the data systems to support the child welfare agencies becoming members of CWLA as well, and including the universities and the folks really doing the research, and then a good grouping of individuals. But beyond that, we also partner with entities. So one that you're probably familiar with, by way of example, would be the Center for Supportive Housing. So I wanted to just ask a question just to see, from you all, if you don't mind, whether you are connected in any way with anybody that is a CWLA member, how you might know if they are. We're basically have the majority of the public child welfare agency as members, and they come and go depending on their budgets and priorities of the governors and stuff like that. But and you can always know, usually they have something on their website related to it. So we just wanted to see where you were at.
So folks can just take another 30 seconds or so to respond.
I don't know that I've ever seen any of you being members. Go ahead, Abra.
Oh, no, I was going to say, it looks like mostly no's and not sure's.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. So, despite being the oldest and having a lot of agencies that are involved with us, some of that, it might be a little bit hidden. But let's get at this a little bit different. So there's an additional question that I had for you. I wanted to see if you were doing any kind of partnering with the public child welfare agencies that might be in your area. It might be a county level agency, or perhaps the state related ones, and what you might be partnering around, because you might actually be working with them even though you don't know that they're a CWLA member. I'm also asking you this question because I'm setting the stage for a little bit further information that I'm going to share in a little bit.
Just a few more seconds. Final votes.
And Abra, if anybody's entering anything into the chat box, you'll let me know.
Absolutely. Okay, so it looks like prioritizing housing to prevent children from coming into care, focusing on securing housing for youth who are transitioning out of foster care, and planning support services for families were the most popular.
Yeah, this is great. And the reason that you have such a critical service to really help and support families, especially both to prevent them from coming into care with child welfare, as well as to really support them in being able to return and be with their, even whether it's a foster family or adoptive family, it's so important. And so your role is going to be potentially even more important, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So thanks for doing that. But let's just pause a moment, if you don't mind, and I just want to talk a little bit about our mission. It really is to really work with and engage all of those entities that I've been talking about as part of our membership, but even more broadly, all to identify those policies or the best practices, also those collaborative kinds of efforts, even in terms of some of the things that you might actually currently be doing, all related to the better outcomes. And the excuse me a minute. Okay, so as part of that work, how is it that, and what is it that we're really doing as part of this? So we kind of focus on some key areas. I've already mentioned a little bit in terms of the National Blueprint for Excellence in Child Welfare. That's part of our standard setting kind of work. And we draw on the expertise of members and those that are in the field, maybe even in the communities, for the work that they're doing to really inform that. Do a lot of work around advocacy, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of those things that perhaps you could, get involved with as part of the call to action. Focus a lot in terms of the education and some of the membership related pieces. So I thought this visual might help as a way for you to kind of understand how all the pieces fit together. It really is working with that commitment to practice excellence in everything that we do. And if you start on that bottom left, related to the standards of excellence, in addition to the national blueprint that you might be more familiar with, we have standards of excellence that we have across all of the child welfare related kinds of services that really is the meat of what they should be doing if they were really doing this in the right way. And we also establish the best practice guidelines as part of that. We do a lot of stuff to publish and get information out to the field and really inform. And our publications department, so we're not only doing publications for the field, in some of those things that you can see there, and our specialists of the journal, in a voice magazine that we have, and some of the different newsletters that we send out, but we also publish children's books so that are award winning. So that might be a place for you to connect into, because there might be, if you have opportunity for getting more resources or things that are going to be supportive of helping families, that might be a place to really get it there. One of the things that I wanted to point out to you in that membership piece of it, where you see the red dot, the part that we're not, and I don't quite know all the ins and outs of your group and how you all function, but as CWLA, we're not a trade association. So we'll have members that really work with us to inform the work that we do to identify those best practices, to learn from us and do all the networking that we've been talking about. That seems like that might be some of the stuff that you're doing. But we often take positions that our members don't like. And probably the most salient one that I can think of that's recent was related to the issue of the use of corporal punishment. So there's plenty of research that shows that corporal punishment is harmful to children. And so we take a stand that corporal punishment should not be used, whether it's in school, in the home, wherever it is. And, in some states it's allowed. And so many of our members, push back on that. And we still say, the research is there, we should do no harm, and therefore take that position. We have a combination of set training modules and do a whole lot of other kinds of training, a lot of consultation and support to states and other entities related to the best practices and helping them improve their work. We'll go in and do a lot of reviews of public child welfare agencies and others around, what it is that they're doing to help them really look at the things that they might need to be doing differently. We'll do a fair number related to child deaths as part of helping them really understand what they need to be thinking about doing differently and better connecting the dots in the work that they are doing. And then I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of that advocacy stuff and the policy related work. So I'll hold on that. I think to help you understand a little bit more about the kinds of audience that we really focus on. So it is those agencies that I've been talking about that are really delivering those direct services. So we have members that are charter schools, so they have their own association, but they are also members because they are connected with the broader service delivery and wanting to make sure that they're really delivering things well. So they sit as part of that. And then the policymakers, obviously, and those who really need to be doing the pieces they need to be doing to support all that good quality work in order to help children and families flourish is another one. And then the next is all those other entities that help support those pieces. So I wanted to highlight a number of different special projects that we've been doing that might be of interest to you. I identified this one related to the National Blueprint only to give you the connector to what you might have been hearing last year if you had been there. But this is the National Blueprint is really the overarching framework to all of our standards of excellence. So we have had a group of members from across the country who have been working with us to help create a robust implementation guide so that everybody could be using it to really begin implementing the standards that are in the National Blueprint, and they apply to communities more broadly. So these groups are really helping us to tweak all the tools and make sure that they're relevant and user-friendly for the broader community of agencies, perhaps such as yourself, who might be involved with children and families, and really making sure that everybody's doing their part for ensuring the protection of children and that they're safe. The other thing that we've begun doing is kind of creating tools that translate the National Blueprint really in their language to help them understand what it means and its relevancy for them and what role they might be playing related to some of those. So as you would imagine, in your wheelhouse, I think that a lot of the standards that would be sitting in the National Blueprint are really things that you could be advocating for in that are get in place in the public agency or get in place in the community in order to help support children and families. And then we have a whole learning collaborative that the broader community collaboratives will be part of. I haven't heard that anybody has actually will be having a housing entity as part of it, but it sure would be great if they were participating in order to help inform our work. So The other things that I thought might be of interest to you, I know Abra referenced the panel that Chris had been part of. So based on that work from the national academies, we really have a huge amount of work that we're doing to really push the reduction of poverty for these families. We're doing a lot of work to learn from other countries what they are doing in order to really support families and have them not come to the child welfare system. So they have a different kind of front end, we call it, of the system in a way that the United States does not. So what is it that they're doing that could be of use here in this country? I asked you the questions earlier related to the families related to your collaboratives, because I was asking that in the context of this new legislation, the Families First Prevention Services Act. And I don't know how many of you have even heard those words, but previously, most of the money that child welfare agencies get to function in order to do their work really they can only tap into it once a child comes into care. And so there's very little money to really prevent children from coming into care. And so this legislation allows the states the flexibility to use their dollars to actually prevent a child from coming into care and being able to keep them safe in their homes and their communities. And so a lot of the focus is going to go to that prevention related stuff. And often housing is a pretty significant issue in solving some of those issues. And therefore, even when they might not be able to live with their parent, but they can with their grandparent, they might need housing or a bigger unit in order for the children to go and live with grandma, or there might be a potential adoptive parent, but they need a bigger housing in order to do that. So you might find yourself really hearing about and being involved in more collaborative kind of creative thinking. And the other piece that it does is really helps with, thinking about maybe more of those supportive services that might be relevant in your housing projects that might, like more trauma-informed parenting programs that would be helpful to them, or a variety of other things. So I raise it just for you to really be aware of. We do a lot and are going to be doing more related to the social determinants of health and how significant that is in really getting better outcomes for the children and families. We're trying to really support all those young professionals coming into the system and really helping them be the best that they can be, because they are our future leaders. And there is a huge, I don't know about your world, but in child welfare world, there's a huge group of folks that are all retiring out of the system, whether it's in the public child welfare system or in the not-for-profit world. And so we're seeing massive transition happening and the need to really support them in a good way. And then the other thing I want to highlight, and I'll do it by way of this next slide, is some of the work that we're doing for our 100th anniversary. And so we are going to be we've decided that we're not going to focus on kind of having one big party to celebrate having existed for 100 years and the, up and down kind of journey that has taken. But we wanted to do it in a different kind of way. So I'm going to take it back to my conversation at the very beginning when I was talking about who we are and how we got formed. We want to, those White House conferences stopped in the 70s when Reagan came in, and he took all that money and kind of said, give it to the states, and the states will do those kinds of gatherings, but it really didn't happen. And one of the key components of those gatherings was really getting the input from the community around what was working what was needed, what were the barriers to those things happening to really give direction. And those White House conferences happened every 10 years. So we have not had that kind of input really in the way that it needs to happen since the 70s. So we've decided to do a virtual White House conference. We tried to get the White House to do this. We tried under Obama, and so we've just decided we're going to do it as part of our 100th anniversary. So we really want to have one of those community kinds of meetings that will take place, we're hoping, in all 50 states, if that's possible, drawing from our member agencies to do it, but perhaps you all might have an interest in doing it, and we can have conversation around that. And we're going to be doing those throughout the year from 2021 on 2020 to when our conference is in 2021, and I think that's in April. And with all that input that everybody's getting at that local level, we've actually had a number of our members that have decided they're going to do it for the whole state. It's really get that input across communities in the state in order to really inform what needs to happen. So all that will come to us, we'll compile it, we will really put together, excuse me a second, our roadmap for where we need to go and really what we need to be advocating for on behalf of the children and families and the agencies that really serve them. And then we'll be sharing them back with the local communities, the report and stuff, so that they also can be using it in their advocacy work that would really give them more in kind of the things that they want to be advocating for and stuff. We think that'll create much more of a cohesive, collective kind of voice to bring forth as part of, on behalf of children and families. So I want to pause and see if any of you do have an interest in being part of some type of the community meeting in your state or community.
And I'm sorry, I missed this poll, so I'm just doing it very quickly.
No problems. You all can be thinking about it as because the thing that might be, a possibility in it, you might actually have meeting space that the meetings could happen. And for the population of families that find their way and are part of your delivery system, so to speak, your housing, that it would be wonderful to make sure that we're hearing their voice in all of this around what really does work for them, what is it that's missing and it's really needed, what the barriers are that we really need to be addressing and going beyond. So
So folks want to take just a couple more seconds to respond. It's not binding.
yeah, exactly. Not binding at all, just to see an interest. And also because it then gives us to say to the members, you need to be reaching out to the housing community because they really want to be part of this. So that's great that some of you have an interest in that. So, so two things that you can do, and partly you could be connecting with Abra to let her know, and she and I, we can be communicating because I really would like to make sure to figure out how to take that wonderful idea and energy that you all have to really help bring that into this whole conversation and making sure that that's getting captured. So whether we have members in your area or not, I don't know, but I sure want to find a solution for it. So please let her know. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some of our advocacy work and that might or have some relevancy for you. There's a whole lot going on to reauthorize the what we call CAPTA, but that's the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, and the piece around the community-based grants for prevention of child abuse and neglect. This legislation has been around for a good chunk of time, but there's almost no money that goes into it. So I can speak in particular on the community-based grants for the prevention of child abuse and neglect. When they do the divvy up the funds, so to speak, I mean, a state might get $70,000. There's not a whole lot that you could be doing related to it. So there's been a lot of effort, especially with that new legislation that I told you around focusing on the prevention piece of it, to really get additional dollars to really help and support families so that they don't have to come to the attention of child welfare, and so really prevent children from being harmed. So a very important piece of the legislation. We did get the Families First passed, so that was great. I talked a little bit around some of the poverty related information. There's a lot of work going on related to shifts under this current administration that lifts some of the protections around discrimination and for children, and the placement of children in terms of the types of families that are being recruited and stuff, that we've been doing a lot of work related. And we've gone back to our old roots of really focusing on childcare. So we set that legislative agenda every year. We focus all of our efforts when in our conference for folks to go to the Hill and really advocate for these kinds of issues. Here's some more of the issues that we paid attention to in 2019. You'll notice some of the stuff related to the stable housing, in particular for families involved with child welfare, because it's so important. And as you know, in your world only too well, there's so much unstable housing and homelessness for these families that it really does impact their ability to remain stable and have their children with them. So it really does matter to us a lot. As it relates to some of our current kinds of issues that I thought might have some of the relevancy, obviously we're still focused on CAPTA and paying attention to, so the adoption piece of it has to do with some of the challenges related to families being adopted, adopting children, and some of the funding related issues. And we're just really wanting to support finding those places that can really provide some permanency for children when the family unfortunately can't, in order to make sure that those are happening for them. We're also, as you can see by the third bullet there, related to the fostering stable housing and getting that, urging folks to get their senators to sponsor it. And the last one I just highlight for you, so you have some understanding of what that legislation is. But as states have been trying to implement their Families First, we've noticed that there's some significant problems related to it. There's not enough funding to implement some of the really key components that they had in there around evaluating what they're doing, and some of the shifts in the system piece around the courts, et cetera. So this legislation was created in order to fill some of those holes so that states could actually be successful in their implementation, and that we all can work towards having the better outcomes for the children and families. But on the left side of that, that is our kind of portal page that we have for, we're connected to Voters' Voice. And so this is a place where on our site, and anybody can go there, where you could go and really use that as a way to communicate with your members of Congress and kind of urge them to, such as the one that you see up there, really endorse the Families First Transition and Supportive Act. So we have numerous of them up there that perhaps you might have an interest in checking out or being connected with. And then the other thing that we do is this newsletter that we put out every week that really highlights all the child and family related kinds of things that we're advocating for, what's happening on the Hill, etc. So our members love it because it's a good way to stay connected. But many other people that are not members also get this newsletter because they find it so helpful. So you can also consider, going and accessing that if you want. And so some of the other thoughts that I had by way of things that you might need to could get connected with related to us and our work so we have already talked about that 100th anniversary community meeting. And you can just stay connected. So, good old social media that has helped us all stay connected in ways that we never had before. I did want to highlight for you to think about. So I know when I talked to Abra, she talked about some of the projects that some of you have going on that sound like they're connected to some potential research or other universities and other folks. And so many of those projects have the potential to be part of our child welfare journal. And so when we did the special issue on child welfare and substance use, the whole housing component of that is critical, especially for those families. And so some of the housing related pieces actually got woven into some of those articles in those special issues of the journal. So that's one example of where your connector might come in, and especially if you are having those kind of collaborative efforts with child welfare, folks are always interested in getting, published. And so, we're always looking for articles, and that journal highlights the research, the policy, and the practice pieces. So it isn't that you have to have, hardcore random controlled trial kind of project that you're a part of, but there might be other things that are practice related or policy related. So I really encourage you to think about that if that's kind of where your interest is in terms of some of that writing and getting information out to the field. And then we're always looking for things to put in our voice magazine that I mentioned in one of the earlier slides. And so, if that's something that you think would really be helpful, let me know, let Albert know. I mean, we could collaboratively work together, have somebody do interviewing of you if you don't want to do the original writing. I mean, there's lots of different ways, but it's really important to get some of that information out in ways that could be helpful to the broader field. So as Aubrey did in terms of encouraging you to go to the summit that she was talking about, you might have an interest in participating in some of our conferences. And the one that Aubrey, you were mentioning, the housing is one, sounds like it's right about the time as ours. So, who knows when. Yeah, you're in DC at the same time. So, and we try to make sure that we have parts of our conference that connect to some of these broader parts of the system that are so critical for children and families being successful in their homes and communities. So we often have a whole housing component to it, but you have exposure to the broader issues going on. The webinars. So our webinars are open to the public. When we send out our notices, it's to, I don't know, there's 16 or 20,000 people that it goes out to. even internationally. So some of those topics might be really of interest, so that you might be wanting to pay attention and watch those. And we actually had one of the housing authorities participate in one of the webinars that we did to highlight some of the work that was happening in Florida. And, I can't help myself, but, the more combined voice that we have together, I think the greater we can all be on behalf of children and families, and really doing the things that help them really be successful, especially because we both are dealing with the same population that is so vulnerable and just needs the extra support to really do right by their children. So I have up on the slide in terms of the contact information if you wanted to follow up. And but we wanted to make sure that we left enough time for you to have questions. So I apologize if I've taken up too much time, but I turn it back to Abra and open it up for questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Julie. So, folks, if you have questions, you can go ahead and type them in the public chat box, bottom right hand of the screen. So just while people are still thinking and kicking things off, I think, Julie, it would be helpful if, can you say a little bit more about the virtual White House meetings that you all are planning, that you also polled folks on?
So we will have an actual toolkit. So we're just working on the toolkit right now. And we're leaving them somewhat open as to the audience. We're hoping that across the country, so in the totality of them, we're making sure that we're getting the voice of as many folks as we can get voice from. But we recognize, so, in your world, you're all, you would have people that were all from your housing community, for want of a better way of saying that. And we have members that, one of them that is all foster parents, right? So we recognize that some of the world that you navigate in might be very the grouping that would be pulled together might be more cohesive group than all kinds of different folks from the community. So what we've been hearing, and we've allowed for that, okay? What we've been hearing from folks is that they've been really thinking about trying to leverage the community kinds of collaboratives and meetings that are already taking place, and using them as a way to have one of the meetings that would focus on really this piece. And we have set questions that are to be asked. We kind of give guidance in terms of the information, the way to present it back to us, so to speak. And have a sign-in sheet so that we can have a good understanding of who's coming to the table and who's contributing. Not that we're going to name people, but we have a way of analyzing that in order to inform our information. And we will be having some of those early community meeting presenters, so to speak. So there's a group in Georgia that's with the university, but they're all about community collaboratives. So they started off talking about one community and want to do it for the whole of the community. We have somebody in Florida and different places around the country that have already expressed an interest, but we'll get some of them that will have already had meetings before our conference actually present about it at the conference. So we have a way of garnering interest from folks to really get more people involved in doing them. And they're going to happen throughout the year, so it doesn't have to happen immediately. We imagine it could be over a couple of hours, so not a huge, big all-day meeting where you're doing all kinds of input, that they're going to happen in a variety of ways and yet still give really important information to us. Albert, does that answer it? If there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just wanted to give folks a bit more context who might be interested in being a part of that. I think sort of, I'm not seeing any additional questions come in, so folks don't be shy. If you have any questions for Julie about some of the events, I'm just going to go back a slide here. She really outlined some really great opportunities and resources for you all, so if you have any additional questions about that, please let us know. Julie, I'm wondering also if there's anything that you all either discuss internally or hear from your members maybe about what would be helpful from the housing sector. So, most of the folks who are on today are from housing authorities. Is there anything that you hear about that might be useful? And
Yeah.
that may already be happening in the communities that are represented here, but it's just helpful to kind of hear that perspective.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know is always an ongoing issue for any of the public child welfare agencies, and for that matter, the not-for-profits that work with the families is housing. So that often children can't remain with their families necessarily, or be with the kin who could really support them, or because they don't have the space that they need to have. And so, whatever you can think about in the ways in which you can really be supportive and help with immediate kind of need, and filling those immediate needs really help with creating those kinds of stable environments for the children and families. I think anything that you can think about, and you might already be doing, but the kinds of services and supports that could be right there in the communities that really support families. The child welfare agency is going to have to be doing a whole slew of stuff related to working within and providing services for families within that trauma-informed approach. I just know, and I hear from families that they'll say, and the folks that kind of are the people with lived experience will say, if only somebody had been talking about that stuff with me before, that it would have made a difference in the way that I would have been dealing with my child or parenting my child. And so it's why I give an example of the trauma-informed parenting as something. And CWLA, we've been doing a lot related to trauma-informed kind of parenting programs and trainings. And so that might be a really good thing that you might want to be doing, just bringing some of that to your communities as well, to really help them really be able to be successful. Often, these families, whether it touches on or is within communities that they have been part of, where there's been a lot of community kind of violence taking place, that really has an impact for these children. And so, supporting those kinds of efforts would be really, really good. And I just think that under that Families First legislation, the public child welfare agencies, but broadly the state, is really going to have to be creative in the ways that they're going to be doing things to support and help families. And so I'm really encourage you to keep your ear to the ground for understanding what might be happening in your state related to that, because I think they're going to be coming to the community to really help and think differently. The substance use one you're already addressing, but we know that is such a massive issue of families that with the substance use related issues, the kind of relapse that happens for them on an ongoing basis, and the losing of housing, or just the lacking of available housing for them. So that intersection, I know, is so critical and important for your place at the table and involvement with. And then the other one that I would just mention, that I know I've seen some things happening recently is that population of children that, heretofore child welfare just has not been able to figure out how to really create the right solutions for, but that population of children that age out of the child welfare system. And we're seeing a lot coming into the system at 16 and 17 years of age through adoption breakdowns or their permanency kinds of breakdowns, and they're just challenging in terms of making sure that they have all of what they need and the right kind of housing in order to be successful when they do eventually, age out of the system. So child welfare is trying to, and under Families First, can actually keep involved with them much longer, so up to the age of 23. But we still know that even at that older age, sometimes they're aging out and have no housing. So it's another critical connector.
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of housing authorities, including folks who are on today, are doing some really great work with the Family Unification Program vouchers, the FUP vouchers, particularly for youth who are aging out. So great confirmation of how critical this population is. So I think with that, we're basically out of time. I'm not seeing any additional questions for folks. Sometimes people need to sit with the information a little bit and then have questions after the fact. So for those of you who either are on today or who listen to this recording at a later date, you can always reach out to me, Abra at CLPHA, so that's ABRA at CLPHA.org, or our fabulous presenter today, Julie Collins, who's with the Child Welfare League of America, and her email is jcollins@cwla.org. So with that, thank you so much, Julie. It was really great to have you with us this afternoon, or morning for those of you on the West Coast. We really appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing.
You're welcome, and really, Abra, it was my honor to be part of this. I hope that this was helpful information to you all, and Abra and I'll get together to figure out how we can address all of you who are interested in the 100th anniversary community meeting. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, have a great day, everyone. I will send out a note when the recording is available. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.